Good afternoon. Before we get on to the press conference, I would like to update you on today's statistics. The total tests undertaken is 3,287. That means we have done 93 tests since the last update. The tests concluded is 3,242. This means that there are 45 people waiting for results. We have 4 new confirmed cases since the last update. This brings the total confirmed cases to 320. But I'm pleased to be able to confirm there have been no new COVID-related deaths. 6 weeks ago, we made the difficult decision to close our schools in response to the coronavirus threat to our island. Since then, some primary school hubs and all the secondary schools have remained open to vulnerable children and those of key workers. The current tight restrictions to save lives and save our NHS has also affected nurseries, playgroups and childminders. All the teachers and those that work in our units for those children with additional needs, the caretakers, cleaners, catering staff, nursery staff and childminders have done a wonderful job in looking after the children in their care and working with each other. The creativity and flexibility during a very anxious and worrying time for our community has shown our island at its best. And we have needed to balance the cost of the lockdown against the importance of saving lives. Teachers have been working tirelessly to ensure that pupils' education and long-term aspirations are not another victim of COVID-19. The schools that have remained open have used physical distancing measures and imaginative teaching methods to keep staff and children safe. The existing online resources have been strengthened and expanded with remote learning and support provided by teachers for those children stuck at home. The department has worked closely with all teachers and their representatives to get us this far and are planning together for how we can allow more children to come back to school, but only if and when it is safe to do so. I would like to thank all the unions involved for their positive engagement. Rather than me talk to you, I would like to introduce just 2 of the many wonderful education staff we have on the island who are keeping the hopes and dreams of our children alive during this dark time. Mr. Robert Cool is head teacher at Annika Primary School and has been supporting the Douglas hubs. I'd also like to introduce Mrs. Rachel Smith, who is a teacher and digital leader at St Ninian's High School. Coming on to Mr. Cool, would you like to tell us how things have been for you and your colleagues over the last 6 weeks?
Yes, thank you, Minister, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for listening. Ever since the schools closed to all pupils 6 weeks ago, education staff have been working in completely different ways to what we've ever had to before. It was amazing to see how quickly staff adapted to this change and put their minds to opening of the hub schools the following day. The staff teams manning these hubs are no longer there to teach children, but to look after groups of mixed-age children of vulnerable and key workers. This requires a completely different approach to planning, especially when you have new social distancing and health and safety measures thrown in. From what I have seen from working within my school's hub at Balakotia, and from taking an interest in what's going on around other schools on the island, the staff are pulling out all the stops on a daily basis to make the children's experiences a great deal of fun. This is vitally important at a time when these children don't have the same opportunity as their peers to stay safe at home. Even in a time of high anxiety, staff have remained positive, even volunteering to work over the Easter holidays and bank holidays to ensure key workers could attend work during the early stages in this crisis. I was the head of our hub during Easter week, and the sense of community experienced that week was absolutely brilliant to see. We had gifts of cupcakes, Easter eggs, hand creams from local businesses, charities and the Isle of Man Constabulary. I know this has continued over recent weeks with other treats, and it's lovely that people recognise and appreciate the work our staff are doing and that key workers' children are getting that little boost at this worrying time. Thank you to everyone who has done that for us. There haven't been large numbers of pupils accessing the hubs, and parents are being very sensible in terms of only using these facilities when it is absolutely necessary, recognising that if working patterns allow someone to be at home with the children, then they can stay at home on these days. The message still remains to stay at home as much as you can. Parents, staff and pupils are all showing great commitment and willingness to act in the interests of the wider community at this difficult time. It's not just the teaching and support staff who have had to demonstrate this flexibility in their working, Our cleaning, caretaking, administrative, lunchtime and kitchen staff have all had to do the same and have all pulled together brilliantly to ensure that everything runs smoothly, everyone is fed and looked after over the lunchtime period, and that cleaning routines are at the optimum level for both health and safety purposes. One thing I've really noticed that's come out of this is an ever-expanding sense of teamwork. We've lost that day-to-day, face-to-face contact with our own teams and now are liaising with and working with staff from different schools. This widens the experience of the people you're working with, and I've really appreciated the security of having other head teacher colleagues to bounce ideas off when planning for or heading the hub. Teaching staff have also enjoyed being able to discuss with others what their plans for home learning is like, or other school priorities that they have within their own schools. It feels as though our teams have really grown beyond our own schools now, as we're in constant liaison with fellow heads and staff members from our new teams. There have been great benefits to working in this way, as every decision can be made together rather than on our own, which in a crisis like this is just what is needed. It's been lovely to work with a team of staff from different schools and to see how positive and committed they are to getting things right. These support networks that we have developed over the last 6 weeks are going to be invaluable in helping us to plan whatever the next steps are in terms of reopening schools, and to be able to review what we have learned from this lockdown period and to plan for the future. We all understand that this new way of working isn't going to change overnight. However, I can see that looking at the last 6 weeks of working in a new way, that our staff in education will continue to do everything they do in the best interests of the children, their families, and our island community. Thank you.
I mean, thank you very much, Mr. Cool, for your honesty and insight. I think, as you say, teachers have been working together and looking forward to a new future and new ways. And I don't think some of us will ever go back to the old ways. We've learned new ways of working together and by doing things. I'd now like to invite Mrs. Smith to tell us a bit more about the online learning and how this has developed during the health emergency.
Thank you, Minister. My role is to develop the use of the digital technologies at school and to use that to support and enhance teaching and learning. And as a school, as St Ninians, we've been working hard focusing on the process of teaching and learning throughout many years, and digital technologies have woven into that. So we were well placed to move online as a school because we had our own learning platform that we regularly used. Prior to enforced closures, I suppose like most of us, we were looking at what was happening in the rest of the world. And I'm really fortunate that I have a network of international educators that I know. And so we drew on some of the experiences of colleagues in China and Hong Kong, and we planned based on their experiences. And we planned our home learning policy about 3 weeks before we had enforced school closures. We took an audit of our students and what sort of connectivity they had at home and what sort of hardware they had at home. And if we felt that either of those two were weak, we invited them to join us in the hub, because St Ninians, of course, is a hub school as well. And if they didn't want to do that, we loaned them an iPad, and a number of our students have taken that option. In terms of our day-to-day practices at St Ninians, one of the things that we're really mindful of is having a healthy mind and having a healthy body. And so we've structured all of our day around that premise. So we know that humans like structure, and young people particularly like structure and thrive on structure. So we've produced a structure, but we've also tried to be really flexible with our structure too. So our day runs a little bit like this. Teachers are online during their timetabled lessons. This provides security for our students because they know that no matter what they're doing, they can always find their teacher online when they would have a lesson with them. So no matter what, we will always be there for our students. And during that time, obviously, kids can ask questions and sort out problems with their work and what have you, or even just have a little chat. It maintains contact. The students do not have to be online during their lessons. We don't know what a student's home life is like, and so that's where our flexibility comes in. Our teachers will be there, but our students don't necessarily have to be there. And at the start of every lesson, our teachers begin with what we call the roll call, which is just a chance to say, hi, who's in the lesson? Kids can respond, they speak to each other, they have a little chat, and then the lesson begins. It isn't a live lesson, the resources are there, and the teacher remains online. Tutor time is continuing, so school starts at 8:40 every morning. All of our tutors are online at 8:40 every day to greet our students, to say hi, to have a little chat. Certainly, I know that that's been lovely this week in my own tutor group. We've had a couple of birthdays this week, so it's been nice to be able to say to my tutees happy birthday, and it's been lovely for their peers to be able to say that to them as well. And it's maintained connectivity between the school and home, school and our students, and obviously it's provided some normality for our students too. In terms of parents, we've tried really hard to support our parents via our website, and I'd actually like to say thank you to all the parents of our community for really supporting our school in all of our endeavours as we've taken our school online and we've worked for remote learning. They really have got to grips with the rigours of home learning super quickly, and we would like to thank them for that. Out there on the internet, there's vast arrays of free apps and free this and education that, and it's really confusing for parents, I think, to find activities to supplement the learning that teachers are sending home. So what we've done is we've tried to distill those activities. We've picked the best ones. We've put them on a page on our website so that parents can actually go there and find activities both online and offline to support the learning of their children at home. And we put that out there before the Easter holidays because lockdown was a little bit tighter then, and we knew that actually some parents would really struggle to keep their kids entertained at home. And so we left them with some educational activities that they could use to help, keep life going, keep people sane. Of course, out of adversity, there's always negatives, but there's also positives too. And as a school, we're looking to the future. We hope that this time has really helped our students to build learning power. And what I really mean by that is that develop skills that we try and engender at school. So resilience, independence, resourcefulness. Those children have really had to draw upon those skills during this time. We hope that they return to school with those skills really strengthened and they become their superpowers. We also hope that creative tasks continue when we return to the classroom. We're seeing a lot of creative tasks online, a lot of larger project tasks, and we're hoping that they continue. We're also hoping that teachers continue to share their learning resources with their students on a regular basis, because we know that research tells us that if students review their work regularly, that helps to move their learning from short-term memory to long-term memory. So we hope that that continues too. Another thing that we're hoping for the future is that the use of online quizzing and self-testing continues. We're seeing a lot of that online, and a lot of quizzes are being used by teachers to help their students understand where they're at in their learning. Students really like online quizzes because a lot of them are gamified, so they get to have power-ups and win points and all those sorts of things that students really absolutely love. But more importantly, actually, they get instant feedback so they know where they're right and they're wrong. And in terms of a teacher, they're brilliant because what it means is I can download those results and I can have a look at where the gaps in the knowledge are, where there are misconceptions, and that helps me with my planning going forward as a teacher, and I can sort of plug those gaps and help the kids move on in their learning. As a school, we're really, really proud of our school community. We're really proud of how we've gone to remote learning and how we've all worked together as a team, just as Robert said in the hubs. And it's just a really big thank you to them, because it's those people in the schools, everybody, down to support staff, caretaking staff, teachers, everybody pulled together to try and provide the best experience for our students.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Smith. I'd like to thank both of you and all your colleagues for the time and dedication you've shown in supporting our community. Although some teachers have been working from home, they are working incredibly hard. Although most exams have been cancelled, there is a huge amount of work to be done on predicted grades and coursework to ensure that students get the grades that they deserve. The department have been working closely with teachers and their unions throughout this difficult time to support the staff who support our children. Over Easter, teachers volunteered to keep the schools open for vulnerable children and those of key workers. They volunteered again over the 2 May bank holidays. After listening to professional associations, senior leaders and officers, the department has decided to close our schools as previously planned for the full TT fortnight. This recognises the need for teachers, support and administration staff for a decent break after a period of intense and demanding work. It also allows our children to try to get back to a more normal routine. I'd now like to turn to some of the excellent work going on to keep our culture alive and vibrant during a time of social isolations. The Arts Council have launched a project called home is where the art is. Each day a new video will be added to their website of artists, musicians and poets expressing how they are using new ways to express themselves. Principal trumpeter Jason Evans was the first to show how, despite being alone, music can connect all of us. His rendition of Ellen Valin is amazing, and I must admit, reduced me to tears. So today, I've talked about education and our culture. I would now like to turn to sport. Throughout the restrictions, we've been working with sports people and their organisations to try and allow some resumption of activities. The first online sports award was a huge success, but we need to do more. Through close liaison with public health and organisers of recreational sport, we've been able to risk assess various activities and decide which can restart in a limited format to ensure safety. Yesterday, the Chief Minister announced that recreational fishing could restart this weekend. Today, I'm happy to announce that from Monday, golf courses can reopen to single players or pairs of players from the same household. Clubs have shared ideas and examples from around the world of how the sport can be played in a safe and controlled way for all involved. This is the type of engagement we will increasingly need as we progress. At the end of the day, it will be government and our clinical leaders who make the decisions on measures to protect us all. But it is the people in different sectors and industries who know how we can move towards a safe way for all our people. Over the coming weeks, we will continue to work with those involved with water sports, athletics, crown bowls, tennis, shooting and archery to see how we can work together to bring these sports back safely. We understand the value of education, sport and culture to our island and to our people. We know that it is important for people's well-being. Throughout this health emergency, we will work with teachers, unions, sportsmen and women and our musicians and artists to find a way out of the present restrictions. But we will do so in phased steps, on the best medical advice and always when safe to do so. The Council of Ministers has said on many occasions that they will not hesitate to bring back measures, if necessary, to preserve life. Thank you for your time today, and now I would like to turn to the press for any questions they have. I'd like to start with Tim Glover of Manx Radio.
Mr. My Minister,
Hello.
you mentioned there that you're working with the unions, but yesterday we got a joint statement from 4 unions who were expressing shock at plans to expand attendance at UCM to children of non-key workers next week. Can you update us on what is going on there?
Certainly, Tim. It was an unfortunate misconception and part of, I suppose, the Manx rumour mill. There are no plans to expand the number of children going into UCM next week. What the principal there has been working very closely with are the teachers to do risk assessments so that when the time is right to bring some of those students back, it is done in a safe way. And that was communicated to the unions prior to them putting out their statement. We are really keen to work with all the unions and with all the teachers on this island to make sure that not only they are safe, but their students are safe. Now, at UCM, at the moment, it is open for those vulnerable students and those of key workers. And we know that we have some exams coming up, some practical exams for those doing apprenticeships. And so what we are looking at is over the next few weeks, how we can manage to accommodate those so that those students' education isn't a victim of this coronavirus. But introducing more students into UCM will be part of a wider role of cross-education to make sure that when more students come back into school, it's done in a phased way, a gradual way, with consultation with all those involved. But paramount to that is the safety and well-being not only of staff but of the students.
And the question on the hub schools, are you surprised at the low numbers? I think it's 4.5% of the total in primary schools and 1.3% in secondary schools. Is that what you expected, or is that slightly lower than you expected?
I think what's happened is that parents have really taken on board the message that if your child doesn't have to be at school, keep them at home, keep them safe. As we go through this process, though, we will obviously be looking to increase the number of children who can come into school, whether they be from families in different sectors such as construction and trades and horticulture, and also then looking at those children who really need to be in schools, perhaps those children who aren't accessing online resources and need to come in for their educational purposes. The numbers have been small, but they've fluctuated over the course of weeks as people's shifts patterns have changed. But paramount now is to get a decent roadmap of how we can move together to increase the educational input to our pupils and students on the island. And this has to be done in a safe way. So the department are already working with public health in terms of things like physical distancing, staggering the school day, making sure that not everyone's arriving or leaving at the same time, so that we can try to reassure parents. Because I think you're quite right. As we move forward over the coming weeks and months, we have to reassure parents and their children that coming to school is as safe as possible, both for them and the people working in that school. And this is an ongoing process with the right communication and the right backup from public health that I think we can achieve.
Can I just ask Rob how many children he's got within his hub school, just by way of an example there, to back up what the minister is saying?
Yeah, for the first week that I headed the hub, we had 10 to 11 children in, and this week we've gone up to, I'm heading the hub again on Monday, and I'm looking at figures of about 18 now, so it is increasing at the moment. But again, it's pushing that message over that if they can stay at home, please, they do stay at home. I'm in an unfortunate position where I have my own son and my wife is a key worker as well, so when I'm heading the hub, my son has to attend one of the hub schools at Rankin School, and they do a brilliant job, and I'm confident in everything that they're doing there to keep my son safe within the school environment as well.
Thank you very, very much. If I can move now on to Leanne Cook from 3FM.
Good afternoon, Dr. Allenson. My first question is probably the question on everyone's lips. Do you have any idea when schools on Ireland might reopen? I know you probably don't know an exact date, but do you have any sort of timeline?
There isn't a date. What we are trying to do, as I said, is get a roadmap for gradual stages, working with the unions, working with the teachers, what is possible. I will have to be honest with you that as we move to getting more children coming into schools, we will have to redesign those schools. We will have to space desks apart. We will have to make sure that people aren't facing each other, so if they cough, they don't cough over somebody else. This is going to be a major bit of work as we move forward. And we may not be able to have all our children back at school until later on this year or even further than that. This is why some of the online resources are so important. The other aspect is that even when we have opened the doors wide, there will be those students who can't come back to school because of pre-existing conditions or because they're afraid to do so. And again, that's why the work Mrs. Smith and her colleagues are doing in terms of online learning is so valuable. And also really important is there are those teachers who will not be able to come back into a school environment because of their own pre-existing conditions. And so we're working with them because they have got a huge amount of expertise and they can be a really valuable resource in terms of supporting those children who still remain at home. I think after this pandemic, things will never be the same. We will move forward. We will be doing things in a different way. But certainly in terms of opening the schools, there is no agenda. We know where we need to get, but how we get there is going to be very gradual and in a stepwise approach. So if at any time the evidence shows that there are safety issues or we see spikes in the number of cases in our community, we can halt, sort things out, test, contain, contact trace, and then move forward when it's safe to do so.
Thank you. And my second question, this is actually a question from the public. When the schools do eventually reopen, if parents don't feel comfortable with resending their children into schools, will they be subject to any sort of penalty?
Yeah, this is something we addressed right at the start. I think there is quite understandably a lot of fear and anxiety about large social gatherings, and schools are that in a nutshell. And it's very difficult sometimes, particularly with younger children, to get them to physical distance from each other. They naturally want to come together and hug each other. One of the first things we did as the state of emergency was announced was remove that mandatory obligation for parents to send their children to school. And we will continue with that because we understand the stresses that puts under parents. We will try to reassure them, and we will try to reassure them in every way, from the teachers through to the health department. But I think you're quite right. If a parent doesn't feel that their child can return to school, that's completely their assessment. What we need to do, though, is to support that and also support that family and that pupil at home. And as Mrs. Smith has been saying, schools have been lending out IT equipment, and we're looking into those families who perhaps don't have access to the internet, how we can help them actually engage, but in a different way.
Thank you.
If I can come on to Simon Richardson from Business 365 magazine.
Yes, good morning, Dr. Allison. My first question, if I may, could I aim at Rachel? Rachel, firstly, it's great to hear about the work that's going on. There's a feeling in the UK and beyond, I think, that maybe online learning has been a much underutilised facility in schools and colleges. In view of the crisis as it continues, do you expect it to play a much bigger role in schools in the future?
Well, as I said when I was speaking, we do expect that some of the practices that we've been undertaking during this time of enforced closure will continue into the future. And so, yes, I would like to see digital learning be used much more within schools. I think we would call that blended learning. So there's a mixture of using digital technologies to enhance and support learning, along with having a teacher in a classroom, like actually physically supporting their students there. And you can get a really nice mix between those two things. And I think probably actually what we've learned from this period of time is that we can bring digital learning into the classroom that bit more, and we can blend it with the traditional way of teaching, and it can be really successful for our students.
Thanks, Rachel. And secondly, if I could turn to Dr. Allison, please. Yep. Minister, in respect of the reopening of schools, you've mentioned it could be later this year, could be longer. Would it be helpful, do you believe, to actually set a provisional date of maybe the start of the new school year in September, just so people have some kind of a target?
I think that would be lovely. But the reality is that we need to work with teachers, with families and with pupils throughout the next couple of months as we become more familiar with this new normality. I think it would be great to say that everything will be back to normal by September, but we don't know that. Particularly those children and those staff members who can't come back to school at the same time, and we don't know what the physical situation, the health situation will be on our island. So I'm very wary to actually set dates and aim towards those just for the sake of it. I think what we've said and what government have said is as we move out of what has been a very tight lockdown set of restrictions, we need to do this in a very phased way. I would love to say that things will be back to normal in September. The reality is we will have a new normal, and none of us know what that will be. However, what we can do is plan ahead by using new technologies, by using distance learning, by using that support for those people who can't come into schools to make sure that nobody's education is disadvantaged, and also to make sure that those pupils and students who have got to do assessments and exams get the grade they need then to move on to the next phase. Thank you. If I can turn now to Paul Moulton from MCTV.
Hello, Dr. Allison. Before I ask questions, it's the usual bit. Can you break that 4 new cases down for us, please? Are they in a nursing home, in the community, yep. in public what?
If I can say that they were all in the community, none of them are in a nursing home, and they're all people who are being managed in the community.
Does that worry you then, that information?
No, it shows that the virus is still here. People have been talking about eradicating the virus from our islands and getting rid of it completely, but that's incredibly difficult to do. I think what we will see is as we gradually modify some of the restrictions we've got, we will see sporadic cases happening. And the interesting thing is then doing the proper contact tracing to find out why. And sometimes there's a link. It may be somebody who's working with somebody else who's got it in the past. Other times it may be sporadic. And again, it's just trying to find out that sort of spider's web of connections we have in our society, how different people can get infected. So it doesn't worry me. It's being realistic. What perhaps worries me would be a sense of false complacency if we went through a whole week of no cases and everyone thought, oh, we've got rid of it, that's yesterday. We need to live with this. We need to be able to manage this and move forward. So the fact that we're doing more testing, more focused testing, and we're finding cases, from my point of view, is a good thing, because then we can do the contact tracing, try to clamp down and stop it spreading further.
So just on that, do you make a list of what they do? Like, are they construction workers or are they teachers or whatever? Do you know where the cluster could potentially come from?
As a politician, no, but what we're doing in terms of the Isle of Man government is setting up a very, very good contact tracing system using the right data, but also medical intelligence to try to make those links together, to try to put together those jigsaw pieces that if somebody gets it, where did they get it from and where could they then spread it further? And it's by doing this really quite complicated work that we can hopefully confine the virus and then eventually deal with it and suppress it.
And the real question I was coming to was, obviously we had this doctor making a video went very public. And I mean, you're in this unique position, you're in Coman, you're inside the tent, and you've got all the knowledge of a doctor. Did you agree with Coman on what they did? Or do you also feel that the doctor has a place to say that? And, obviously it's conflicting with what the advice you've given.
Yeah, Dr. Rankin has completely the right to say what he feels, to express his fears. Now, I've spoken to Dr. Rankin, we've sent each other emails. He works at Meds, he often does night shifts, so he has a very different, perhaps, perspective of the medical situation on the Isle of Man compared with those GP partners who are working in their communities constantly, day and night. I think he obviously had fears in terms of reducing the restrictions and fears that might increase the spread of the virus. But as you've said, I'm in a slightly different position in that I can perhaps see a wider view. I can see not only the benefits of the restrictions that we brought in, but also the damages they've caused. We know that domestic violence and domestic abuse cases have gone up. We know that some children are socially isolated and are missing out on education. We know that people have lost their jobs. We know that people have sometimes had mental health illnesses because of these restrictions. So it's trying to get that balance right. And I think you can only get that balance right and make the right decisions with as much information as possible. So although in Coman we often have some quite heated discussions about the best way forward, we all agree that what we've brought in now is exactly the right thing to do, but we will actually review that on a regular basis every week to make sure that what we're doing is right for the time, look at the data, look at the number of cases, and then move forward when it's safe and possible to do so.
So to be absolutely certain, Coman voted unanimously for the easing restrictions for construction workers to go back to work.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Can I come on to Adrian Derbyshire at Isle of Man newspapers?
Hi, Minister. Can you tell me what progress you've made with the teaching unions over providing access to children's non-key workers? Mm-hmm. And were you hoping to be in a position to make an announcement on that earlier?
I think what we've been trying to do is work with teachers and all the unions to say, how would we do it when the time is right? But these sort of decisions aren't actually for me in the education department to make. We have to see how it would be possible, and then really what we're waiting for is the medical advice that it's safe to do so. To be honest with you, yes, I would have loved to have opened up the schools a little bit early. I know that there are people out there who are actually getting quite frustrated and would like their children to be back at schools, but we will only do so when it is safe, both for those pupils and for their teachers and for the rest of the staff at the schools. We've already had discussions right across the public sector in terms of PPE, in terms of the use of masks, in terms of how we keep the schools safe. But we will only start allowing more children back into the schools when it is safe to do so. And that has to be based on the latest medical data, but also that clinical advice that is actually underlying a lot of the decisions that the Council of Ministers make on behalf of the people of the Isle of Man.
And do the the reopening of the schools, does that feature in the 6-stage plan that's going to be unveiled by Chief Minister early next week?
It does. I mean, schools obviously are an intrinsic part of our community and our society for lots of different ways. Education is so important, both to young people and to all of us. There are also concerns, quite justified concerns, by people who've gone through some of the influenza pandemics, that perhaps schools are a breeding ground, that children are super spreaders, and that by bringing children back into school would somehow exacerbate the situation and set us back. The international research doesn't actually support that view. We know that children can get coronavirus, but often they're asymptomatic. We don't know how much they can spread into bringing it home to their households or bringing it back into the school. But we're working internationally and through public health to try to understand that better and try to make sure that as we do gradually increase the number of children coming into the schools, that is done in a safe way. So yes, that the schools, the opening up the schools eventually, but certainly in the short term, over the next weeks or months, increasing the number of children who are coming into those hub schools is something in the overall programme. But as I said, is being taken in a very stepwise approach, and certainly there are no plans at all to throw open the doors to everyone to come back into either our schools or colleges or nurseries. Only we will be making very small, gradual steps based on the scientific advice and based on the best medical recommendations, because at the end of the day, although education is really important, we have to have a safe environment for all the people who are using our schools and for all the staff that are working there. Did you have another question, Adrian?
Yes, a question of about remote teaching. So we had an email in from a parent of a year 10 student at one of the high schools. I think they'd also forwarded this email to you, so you'd be aware of it. My son has logged on to Google Classroom every day to access work which has been set by his teacher. This work involves reading the work provided, researching and submission of work to his teachers. My main cause of concern is the lack of actual teaching. There is currently no online classes where the students can be taught by the teachers. Children are expected to teach themselves, which is very difficult if they don't understand the initial concepts. Chemistry, physics, maths, etc. is impossible for many children to learn without a teacher explaining and teaching first before they are expected to do the work. I imagine different rules apply to different age groups and different schools, but can you give me a response to that?
Yes, certainly. I mean, I've responded to that parent, and also the head teacher has responded as well. I think what we've seen is we've always used online resources and remote teaching to help students. Now what we're trying to do is gear that up a huge amount in a very short period of time and with very little notice. So we are constantly learning and developing new techniques and doing things in different ways. As we go forward, though, what we need to do is work with teachers right across the board to try to make sure we have some common ideas and learn from other people's experiences. And perhaps, Mrs. Smith, you'd like to come in and say a little bit more about that, how we can structure people's time, because certainly in your school you're having roll calls, which other people perhaps aren't using at the moment.
Yeah, certainly at our school we do have a roll call. Obviously you don't have to be in the roll call. You know, that's optional, and no student has to be in a lesson at any given time. In terms of live teaching, the issue for our school at this moment in time is that actually it's not very equitable. If you are online like we are all now in a Zoom lesson, it really uses a lot of high bandwidth. And so if you've not got great Wi-Fi, actually you can't access that lesson. Also, we don't understand what children's home lives are like, and to actually say, I need you to be in a lesson at 11 o'clock on Tuesday morning, for some students and for some parents, that would be really difficult and really stressful. And so what we've tried to do at St Ninians is that our staff are trying really hard to structure the learning with clear instructions, with voiced keynote and PowerPoint presentations, so that they can explain that learning to those students. They can send that as a video. We also use Google Classroom, and we can send that as videos via Google Classroom to our students, and they can access that learning when it suits them. They know that we're online during their timetabled lessons, so they can come to us during those times and get help with any issues or queries that they might have. And for the moment, for us, we find that to be the most equitable way forward. I understand that different schools have different contexts, and so they may feel that live teaching is a way forward for them. But for St Ninians at this moment in time, that's our view on it.
Yeah. And I thank you very much, Mrs. Smith, for commenting on that. I think we're all learning from each other as we go through this process and all improving what we do. And some of the introduction of new technologies, such as Zoom, that I'd never even heard about until this started, I think has been very interesting for all of us. If I can turn to Tim Glover, I think you had another question.
Yes, so there's lots of questions coming in, so I'll try and summarise them. Childcare for construction workers is one area that's being talked about. Financial support for students who can't access government money until the summer, and also a class and a year will have children of various abilities. Are you worried that those that are struggling naturally academically are going to get left behind?
Yeah, I mean, to answer those questions one at a time. Again, obviously, the council ministers and the government allowed more people to go back to work last week, and what we've seen is certainly in terms of the construction industry, the horticulture industry, some of the trades taking off now. To allow those children back in, we're not quite sure how many would come back in. It could be up to 1,000 children across the educational sector, and we need to manage that very carefully. So the council of ministers are meeting 3 times a week, but one of those meetings will be about the latest data and getting the clinical health recommendations as to whether it's now safe to allow more children to come back to school. So whilst we're working on a roadmap with teachers about how we would accommodate those children, it has to be done when it's safe to do so for everyone involved. In terms of the financial assistance for those university students who are perhaps back now, but back in a bit of a surreal world, and certainly not the world that they expected. We've paid all the maintenance grants that were due for the 3rd term, whether they were at university or not. And we've also worked with Treasury in terms of support. The Treasury Minister made quite a clear statement that when their term time is officially finished, they will be eligible to apply for job seekers allowance if they want to and can go through that process, because a lot of these young people would normally start getting jobs. They aren't there at the moment, so we need to support them and make sure that they're safe and they're all right. And again, I think you make the very good point about making sure that people aren't left behind in all this. And I think that's one of the concerns of a lot of the teachers I've spoken to, that whilst they may be interacting with certain students and they're being online and they're talking to them, there are a small cohort that are missing out, that they're not able to contact. And so as part of the introduction of more children to school, we really want to use that teaching prowess, that intelligence, to try to get some of those children who might be struggling back into the school for their education's sake. Leanne, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I just have one further question, just for clarity. You said before that schools will be closed over the TT fortnight. Will this closure extend to children of key workers, or will they still be able to attend?
Yeah. At the moment, our plan is to close the schools completely, to try to give people a break, a rest from this. The last 6 weeks have been brutal. People have had to adapt very, very quickly. And we know that most people have got different ways of dealing with childcare, particularly over what was a planned holiday. We need to give those key worker children a bit of a rest. They haven't had bank holidays. They've been at school all the time. And we certainly need to give the people who work in schools, particularly teachers, a bit of breathing space to try to surface for air and try to then plan for then resumption of the classes that they're doing. And as I said, we will then hopefully around the TT period know what the health situation is on the island and whether we can try increasing the number of children who are coming into our hub schools. Paul, I think you had another question.
Thank you very much. I think this is probably for Rob, really. You've got these hub schools now operating with the self-distancing in place. So you're an example of what the new norm will be. Can you give us a percentage of how many pupils you can get into most of these hub schools as an example of, you've already said, Minister, that you may not be able to get everyone back into the buildings as they are now. So how is it, Rob, looking for you?
Well, if we I went into all of our classrooms last week to measure up, and if the social distancing rules remain and 2 meters apart, you're looking at 6 children per classroom. It's that That's what we've got to look at, isn't it? And then in terms of our hubs, when our hubs when within our own school hub, we've currently got 4 or 5 children attending. If that went up to over 6 children, we would probably end up having to open up 2 hubs then and have operating in 2 classrooms for Annika School. So that's the way we're working at the moment, because the guidelines are still obviously the social distancing rule of the 2 metres. So you've got to try to fit those children into those spaces.
Have you learned a lot because we hear about people reporting back saying that the kids still do what kids do, which will mingle and do things. Is it really difficult to keep that separation?
It is, especially with the youngest children. You know, if we've got some children to the reception year 1 age, it's very difficult with them, but you've just got to try as best you can to keep those measures in place, really.
And Minister, you guys build a lot of new schools by the sounds of it, or new classrooms or something to cope with the new normal?
We have got some very good plans in terms of expanding the school's position on provision on the Isle of Man. I mean, particularly in terms of QE2 and the STEM block there, and also Castle Russian School that people have talked about beforehand. No, we can't build new schools for this. What we are doing, though, is working with teachers and working with the scientific community about the idea of physical distancing. We're using 2 metres at the moment in the United Kingdom, and we've adopted it on the Isle of Man as a provisional first guidance. But certain other countries are doing different measures, whether it's a metre or a metre and a half, and we need to learn from those experiences. Mr. Cool, if I can come back to you.
Yeah, just for example, you know, one of our largest classes is 27 pupils, which would be 29, 2 members of staff, 27 pupils in one classroom that could essentially fit those 6 pupils in. But the way the hubs work is that we organise them in sort of family groups. So we're not going to go into a classroom opening up to 27 pupils, potentially 90 people, one person with symptoms or something, potentially that's opening up to, 27 households, 29 households. So actually we need to see, don't we, how it works, keep those children in those family groups so that you're not opening up to a wider range of people within the community.
Yeah. And I think this shows the flexibility that teachers are employing. I mean, as we move forward, we're going to have to adjust some of the guidelines that we've got based on the best medical advice and the practicalities. I mean, for instance, there are certain schools where the corridors aren't 2 metres wide. And so we might need to have one-way systems, as you do in some supermarkets where the aisles aren't wide. But working together and by planning ahead, we can get to this situation and hopefully move forward. What I'd like to do is thank you very much for your questions, and again thank Mr. Cool and Mrs. Smith for their time today and letting us know how challenging it can be to teach. Can I just also quickly give a happy birthday to Anna Corlett, a teacher at Braddon School, from her sons Michael, James and Justin, because this conversation has all been about teachers, but also keeping their morale up, because they've been going through an extremely difficult time, both as professionals but also often as parents as well. I have 3 shout-outs for local heroes today. First, we've had 3 nominations from our educators for the Government Technology Service. Here are some of the comments. The team at GTS have got the island's teachers and our pupils all up and running with online learning, as well as handling all the teething problems with such patience. Thank you. Another one reads, it has taken a huge effort to get our children's remote learning up and running. Jeanette has been my hero for the last month, working long hours to get us up and answering all our inquiries. And thirdly, everyone I spoke to at GTS, especially Adam, were legends. Initiating online learning at scale has been a mammoth undertaking for our teaching professionals and for our technology team, but both have done an outstanding job to ensure that, even in these uncertain times, our children can continue with their education from their own homes. Thank you. Secondly, across our islands, this emergency has shown the strengths and generosity of our people and communities. A new initiative has just been launched to support the Manx Solidarity Fund and the Isle of Man Food Bank. The Give a Coffee Yesser campaign asks people to donate money which they would normally be spending on coffee. It's kindly supported by the coffee shops of the Isle of Man, including the big franchise brands, and every pound donated during May at yesser.im will be matched funded up to a total of £25,000 by the Z Zurich Foundation, a private foundation funded by Zurich Insurance Group. And last but not least, the final shout-out is a very special one. Elizabeth Kissack at Castleview Nursing Home in Peel is celebrating her 104th birthday today. Elizabeth is celebrating at Castleview with her friends and staff. I hope you have a wonderful day, Elizabeth. And the Chief Minister has asked me to pass on his very best wishes and many happy returns. I'd like to thank you for your time today. Things are getting better, and we are gradually being able to come through this together. The virus still exists in our community and is likely to do so for some time yet. So this weekend, please stay safe. Stay at home if you can. If you do go out, please respect social distancing. Make the right decisions for you, your family, and your island. Thank you.